In your opinion, what do you feel are some of the steps that a speaker should be taking at the beginning of the presentation? What do you feel?
Icebreakers.
Icebreaker? Yeah. Okay, good. What else?
Reviewing his or her notes.
Reviewing his or her notes, probably long before that, but yes, sure.
Saying hello to people in the room.
Saying hello.
Establishing a connection.
Yeah, you could do that, yeah.
Introducing yourself.
Introducing yourself, yes, unless you've already been introduced, yeah. You might have heard some people, they get this introduction and then they say, as you heard, my name is. Isn't that a silly way to start? What other steps might the speaker do at the beginning? Agenda, perhaps. All those are true. All those are good ideas. Here's a technique that I suggest you might use at the beginning of your presentation. Sometimes you get introduced. Often you may not. They may be simply, okay, stand up and deliver your report, or it's your turn now. It might be that. And then it's your turn to speak, and you take your position. If you're standing at the front of the room, like I am here, take your position, and then pause. Start with a pause for at least 3 seconds, maybe depending on the size of the group, 5 seconds. It might even be as long as 8. Now, why might that be a good technique to start your presentation with? Creates focus, grabs attention, yeah? Why does it do that? Why does that help grab attention?
Because the expectation is that you would stand up there and say something.
Yeah, people are waiting for you to speak. You're the front of the room. You're the speaker. You're the trainer. They're expecting you to say something, and you stand up and you say nothing. So what do?
They focus.
They focus, yes. I heard some.
Stay quiet.
They stay quiet, yeah, because too often at the beginning of the meeting of the session, people are still fiddling around. They're moving, shuffling their paper, playing with their phone, trying to turn the music off the laptop. And they're not ready for you to start speaking yet. So if you start your presentation with a pause, here's what it does for you. Number one, it helps you calm yourself, helps you center yourself, your strength. Number two, the audience is amazed that you're able to stand there for even 3 seconds and say nothing, and they think, wow, going to be a good presentation. She looks confident. Can't wait to hear the first words. And they will hear the first words. For that reason, make the first words powerful and valuable. Don't make the first word something meaningless like, hello everybody, how's everybody today? Glad to see you all made it here. Just useless, wasted words that don't connect with your audience. It's just the speaker warming up. They're not ready yet. Start with something that's valuable right from the beginning, because then they'll judge the rest of your presentation and say, hey, we're off to a good start. This could be good. Try that next time. Oh, and by the way, standing up here, especially at the beginning of your presentation, and saying nothing for 3 seconds is tough. It's tough. So you just count off the seconds inside to yourself. 1,000, 2,000, 3. Your quiet voice, not your outside voice, but inside. And it'll be tough the first time if you've never done it before. But I guarantee you'll look better. The president of the company wasn't doing his job. Imagine that. Now, this president of his company, like many presidents, had many roles to play. His most important role was to bring in new business. And he had done this successfully for years. He had built from nothing a company to doing $50 million in annual sales. He had pretty good success. However, recently, he started losing deals. The pipeline was dry. And the way this company got their business is it was a two-stage process. In the first stage, they would submit a written proposal. And in the proposal would be all the details of the plan, of the project they were going to work on. It would be the schedule, the timing, the resources, the team, and all the costs. Anything that anyone would want to know to make a logical decision about this company. And they would consistently pass that stage. Now, if they're consistently passing, what does that tell you about that company?
Successful,
They're successful.
their products sell, like their ideas are,
Their products and ideas sell, yes. What else? What else do you know? They can do the job. They're clearly qualified because they put everything on paper. It's understandable and clear, and they qualify to get past that first stage. However, the second stage in the process is for the president of the company to come and speak to a committee. They want the president to make a presentation. Why do they want that?
The face, the human perspective,
Human perspective, and what are they looking for?
of your relationship.
Trust, relationship,
Leadership.
leadership, and none of that they can get from the paper, or not enough of that. They need to see the person in real life.
You want to know who you're doing business with.
You want to know who you're doing business with. You want to see what the leader's like. He had consistently passed the first stage, and at one time he had delivered his presentation successfully, but he got stale at the presentation stage, and he was losing deals. His brother, a partner in the firm, decided it was time to make a change. We've got to change something here, and so they called me in to help the president prepare for his next presentation. It was a $10 million project. And when I met the president, I found that, first of all, he was already a good presenter. He was a strong presenter. Confidence wasn't a problem for him. Well, maybe he was a little bit too confident. And the presentation they had was full of beautiful slides because they were a design company, so they knew how to create slides. But I worked with him for 3 days to help him prepare his next presentation. And I coached him each day, and it was a tough go because he was a strong A-type personality. We were both just white at the end of those 3 days. On the fourth day, he got on the plane, flew down to Washington, D.C., delivered his presentation, and the next day he called me, and he said, "George, we got the deal. $10 million. And it turned into a $17 million project, as those projects often go, and I didn't charge commission.
Big mistake.
Big mistake. There were 3 changes that president made to his presentation. 3 changes that you could take advantage of in your presentations. And you don't have to spend 3 days with me to learn. Here are those 3 big changes. First of all, he said less. Most people say too much. We took a 60-minute rambling presentation and chopped it down to 12 minutes. Imagine that. You've got a $10 million project on the line, and you're going to give them your best 12 minutes? Well, that's what we did. The second change he made, and this was a major change for this president, is we got him to change his perspective. Instead of talking about himself and his team and his awards and all the wonderful jobs they did and all the great clients that they had, we got him to talk about what was important to the client, this client. Why were they willing to spend $10 million? What was worth more to them than that? And it turned out it was a legacy project. he came there speaking to them from their perspective. So no longer was he there to sell them something, he was there to help them deliver on their project, their dream. And that was a major change for this president. And the third change, a small change but still significant, was he included a short personal story. In a 12-minute presentation, the story was only about 40 seconds. And the story was about advice that he got from his grandfather when he was a little boy, and how he still used that advice today. Why might a story like that be a good technique to use in your presentation?
Real facts.
He's using real facts, yes. Tell me more.
We identify with their connections.
We identify with it because
we had advice from our grandfather.
yes, we can connect because we all have had or have grandfathers. And grandfathers are part of what? Family. If you want to connect with anyone, you demonstrate how you are like them. And it's hard to connect with an audience when we're from different cultures, different religions, different backgrounds, different languages. But one thing we all have in common is we all have family. And we have strong feelings about family. Some of them positive, some of them negative, and they're all strong. And so when you connect with us on our family, we see that you are like us. And it's funny how our brain works. Our brain is more emotional than it is logical. But when we hear you stand up there and you tell us about your family, our brain goes, oh, she has family just like me. I like her. Our brain is funny that way. But that's how you make a connection, establish a connection with people. Connect with them, show them how you are like them. 3 changes that President made in his presentation. 3 techniques that you could use in yours. 1, to say less. They prepared a 60-minute presentation because the committee said, you've got 60 minutes. It doesn't mean you need to fill it. Can you imagine that committee? Imagine if they had 5 or 6 bidders delivering presentations, and all the other ones were using their 60 minutes and probably more, and this man stands up and delivers his presentation in 12. They're going to say, wow, this is different, and I liked what he said. They spent the rest of the hour asking him questions. So it became more of a conversation and a lot less of a pitch, because we don't want to hear another pitch. But we're open to conversation. He said less. The second change was to change his perspective. What's important to the client, the prospect? Talk to from their point of view. Don't talk about yourself. We really don't want to hear about you. We want to hear about me. When are you going to start talking about me and how this helps me and how it's going to help me get better? And the third change you made was to say less. Too many of us say too much. We feel, and it's not necessarily, if someone comes and, if you're speaking at a conference, at an event, is Vegas on the line? Vegas is on the line right now. In Vegas is the electronic gadget show, big show down there. And they will have presentations and workshops there, and they're usually run anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. If you go there and you've got an hour time slot, don't speak for 12 minutes. They won't like that. But if you got an hour and you finish in 50 minutes, that's pretty good. People are going to go out of there thinking, wow, I got 10 minutes of my life back, and I still got value. If you ask for a meeting, how do you like when people do this? Hey, you got a minute? And you say yes, and they take 10. Are you ever gonna give them a minute again? No, so if you want 10 minutes, ask for 15, finish in 12, and people think, all right. But don't ask for a minute and take 10. Same thing with your presentation, same thing with your meetings. Start on time, finish on time. And whenever you can, finish early. 3 changes to making your presentation. Say less, change your perspective, use personal stories. Those that are in the room here, you have before you the blue guidebook, and there's material in there for you to read later. And if you want to take notes in there, the place to do it is on page 23. Page 23 in the book. Those of you who are remote, you will receive a PDF of this right after the session. I imagine you're making notes already. How do you decide if you have delivered a successful presentation? What is it? Oh, and I'd love to hear from remote as well. Feel free, I believe the sound is on. If you have a question or a response, feel free to speak up, please. How do you know if you have delivered a successful presentation? What's your measure? What do you look for?
The audience, you see like whether they're still engaged or not.
The audience, are they engaged, yeah, or are they using those headrests on those chairs to keep their head? Well, yeah.
No, because he's watching me.
For me, it's if they ask questions. The more questions they ask, the more intrigued they are of what you're trying to present to them.
Okay, are they asking questions? And which could be a good thing, unless they're asking you a question about what you already explained to them. Weren't you paying attention? I just explained that to you. Yeah, so questions can be a good indicator. Yes, it shows interest.
Applause.
Applause is always nice, and you don't always get applause, especially in a business meeting. You very seldom do, but it's nice when you get it, yeah. Response, yes, yeah. Responding to your good questions and prompts, yeah.
Body language. Body language.
Body language tells you something, yeah. Yeah, if they're, they're under the table there with their phone, or on the table there with their phone. Yeah, that tells you that they're not listening. All those are good indicators. Here's how I suggest that you define success for your presentation. Ask yourself this 3-part question. As a result of your presentation, what is it that you want people to think, feel, or do? Think, feel, or do. And if in fact, at the end of the presentation, they are thinking, feeling, and or doing what you want them to do, then it was a successful presentation. It doesn't matter that you left something out. It doesn't matter that the equipment broke down. It doesn't matter that there was noise coming from the next room. None of that matters. All that matters is, did you move them to where, in the direction you wanted to move them? You speak in a business presentation for one reason, and that's to move people. If you moved them, it was a successful presentation. It's not about delivering a perfect presentation, because I don't believe it exists. It's not about being perfect, it's about being successful and effective. And sometimes that means leaving things out. Has it ever happened to you? Maybe you've seen this situation where a salesperson is delivering a presentation to a prospect, and partway through, the prospect is really keen on this product or service, and they start saying, okay, where do I sign? Hey, when can we start? And the salesperson says, wait, I still got 20 more slides to go through. Because marketing say I got to go through this deck. No, you shut up. You sit down, you sign the paper, presentation over. Be clear what you're there for. Where do you want to move them? Once you've moved them, you're done. But I want to tell you more. Who cares? Move them where you want to move them. So that's your definition. That's how you check to see if your presentation is successful? And I suggest you ask that question of yourself while you're preparing your presentation, and remind yourself when you are in front of the group, when you're speaking to them again, so that you don't get off on tangents. You don't get lost on tangents that got nothing to do with where you want to move people. Keep that purpose, and if it helps, write down what a successful presentation looks like. And by the way, you can't necessarily move everyone in your audience. I've seen too many people make this mistake, and I've made the same mistake. You've got everyone on board, and you've got one or two people who are giving you a hard time. And what do? You try to convert those troublesome people, and you lose everyone. Forget about them, because you never had them anyways. Here's a rule of thumb. The numbers aren't provable, but the concept is important. In every audience, it's the 10-10-80 rule. About 10% of the people love you. No matter what you do, they love you. You can do no wrong. You've got them. Then there's 10% of the people who hate you. They can't stand you. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter. They hate you. You're never going to win them. And then you got that 80% that you've got a chance to move. Focus on the 80%. Forget about that 10. Forget about that 10. You're not going to change them. Focus on 80% that you have a chance to move. What steps can you take in order to deliver the successful presentation? Well, I suggest that you set these 3 objectives in your presentation. One is to inform, because you're there to give information, right? However, what's the biggest mistake that people make when they are informed?
Too much information.
Too much information. You know, it's funny, I ask that question of almost every audience, and they always know the answer. We give too much information. But you go to any presentation, any conference, any workshop, and what do you find? You find speakers giving too much information. Why do speakers do that? What do you think?
They're trying to educate, and it's a different thing than just informing.
They're trying to educate versus informing. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I like that. Give me something else. Why else do speakers give too much information?
They're afraid that they won't be seen as knowledgeable.
If the speaker leaves something out, people might think the speaker doesn't know. You didn't tell us everything, therefore you didn't know, but you didn't tell us about this little thing. Why is another reason why speakers give too much information?
So this is going to be a bit strange, but I think they give too much information because they're lying.
Okay, that's an interesting, I haven't heard that. But and what he said they give too much information because they're lying. And you're right, liars talk too much. Liars give longer answers. When they're interrogating people who say yes or no are generally more believable than people who give long-winded answers, because they're not comfortable. They're not comfortable with silence. So that is true. I believe that's true. And here's another reason: people give too much information because they didn't prepare properly.
It's possible also they over-prepared?
Over-prepared, perhaps. And
I couldn't commit to the content.
And I don't like the term over-prepare. What I think it is that people over-prepare and deliver that it becomes plastic. And so, yes, I agree with over-preparing, that they should do that. But go add to that again, please.
They can't commit to their content.
They can't commit to the content because they're not sure what's most to the audience. And they're afraid that if they leave something out, they'll be criticized for it. They don't have the confidence, they didn't do the research to know what's most important. So when it comes to information, here's a technique that you might use. You can use this when you're stating the information, you're setting it up front, or in response to a question. Use this phrase. The top 3 points are, the top 3 benefits are, the top 3 challenges are. Why might a phrase like that be a good phrase?
Because you're not saying that there's no other reasons, but these are the top ones. So if they're gonna think you're unknowledgeable, then you've covered that by saying, I'm just giving you the top ones.
Yes, you've demonstrated that you know there's more than 3, and the only reason you're leaving the other ones out because in your expert opinion, these are the top 3 that are relevant to this situation, this client right now. Until this client raises other concerns or information you don't have yet. But until that time, these are the top 3. So it demonstrates that you know more, and you can give them more if they want it, but guess what? Very seldom do we want more than 3. In fact, 3 is like, oh, I can handle 3. So as soon as you say the top 3 are, first thing that people do is they are relieved. 3 I can handle. 14 I don't want to hear. 28 steps, I don't want to know about that. I attended a conference where a business owner was given a business award from the local chamber, and at lunch, and it was a lunchtime meeting, and at the lunch he was given half an hour to stand up and speak to the group. And he started his presentation by saying, now I'm going to tell you about the 14 lessons I learned along the way. 14. As soon as I heard that, I thought, he's not going to finish in 30 minutes. And he didn't. He went way over time. And number 2, I didn't remember any of them. In fact, as soon as he said it was 14, I stopped listening, period. But 3, we can handle. 3 also resonates with us. Now, what if you have 4 key points? Okay, then give them 4. The point is to keep it short. Keep it in that 3 to 5 range, generally a good range. And 3 is especially good because it resonates with us. It's a magic number. Bacon, lettuce, and tomato. I mean, you know, there's a reason why there's so many things in 3s. The three stooges, the 3 little Goldilocks, and the 3 bears. The 3 amigos. Yeah, the 3s resonates well with us. It's easy for you to remember as the speaker, and the audience will hear it and probably remember it. So give them 3s whenever you can. So the first point is to inform, but give people key information, not all the information. The second objective is to engage. I've been speaking and training and coaching for over 20 years now, and people sometimes ask, they say, George, what has changed in presentation the most over 20 years? And they usually want to hear that it's got something to do with technology. And there's no question, the technology has changed, the technology is fabulous, but the technology is simply a tool. What has changed that's most significant to you as a presenter, as a conversationalist, is that people's attention spans have greatly shortened. And it's not, you can't just say, oh, it's the millennials. No, it's not just millennials or young people. It's old guys like me too. Our attention spans are much shorter than what they used to be. When I was in high school, I worked in a movie theater. I was an usher in a movie theater, and The Godfather came out, and it was a twin cinema, so there were 2 cinemas, and The Godfather played for a year in both cinemas. So I saw that movie hundreds of times, and I loved it. I loved the movie. It was fabulous. And you know, in the break room, the ushers, when we were in the break room, we would play the parts because we knew all the lines. And I still probably remember most of the lines. If you feed me a line, I could probably give you the next line. Love the movie. Then I saw it on TV a few years ago. It came out. I couldn't believe how slow it was. Like I'm thinking, oh God, this is dragging. Used to be good. It's not so good anymore. Everything's so slow. Our attention spans get shorter. When the movie Titanic, remember when Titanic was coming out? And I remember reading at the time it was going to be a 3-hour movie. And I thought, who's going to watch a 3-hour movie? What I noticed, especially when you know the ending, the boat sinks, no surprise, not like a mystery. But it wasn't a 3-hour movie. It was a collection of short scenes. The longest scenes, and I watched it, first time I watched it, enjoyed the movie, then I watched it 2 more times, and I timed it with stopwatch, I timed the scenes. The longest scene was 3 minutes, and most scenes were shorter than that. So by that scene, I mean, like, you know, remember when Leo goes into the dining room, and comes down the grand staircase into the dining room, and then he goes and sits at the table, and they throw some insults around, and then he leaves the room. That whole scene was less than 3 minutes. And within the scene, there were at least a dozen or more shots, different angles, the camera's moving around. So the whole movie was a series of scenes. And it's the changes in the scenes that engage us, that re-engage us. So you need to sprinkle engagement throughout your presentation. You can't simply tell something funny at the beginning of your presentation and say, okay, well, I did that, now I'll give them the boring stuff. No, you got to keep the engagement throughout the presentation, because you can't hold attention, or not for very long, and then you have to re-engage and grab attention again. Tell me what techniques, and let's see if we can hear from some of the folks on remote here. What techniques have you already noticed of engaging the audience that you've seen here today? Tell me what you've seen. I'm going remote first. Let's give them a chance.
Personal stories.
Personal story, yes. Powerful way of engaging. Thank you. Who else can help us out there?
Telling a joke or being funny.
Being funny, not necessarily telling a joke. And what I mean by that is, don't tell jokes, that 3 guys go into a bar. Don't tell that kind of joke, because those jokes put somebody down. But use humor. Definitely use humor, yes. What else for engagement? What else have you seen?
We have a comment from Jeff Schulde saying change of media.
Change of media. Okay, that can be yes. And that could be when you're using slides, or if you go from the speaker to the slide, or simply when you go from the speaker to a prop or work material, printed material, all that. The changes is what engages. Yes, thank you.
Changing your pace and volume?
You notice, yes. You are the speaker. You are the presenter. It's you who've got to grab people's attention. And the easiest way to change your voice, there are 2 changes you can make that are easy. You don't have to be trained to do it, is you can speed up once in a while. Speed up on the parts that are less important. Slow down on keywords, key messages. Because when you slow down, your voice goes deeper, and we hear those words, we hear them better, so they resonate with us.
I have another one that's texted saying, turn the stage to the audience.
Turn the stage to the audience. Yes, make the audience the stage. I like that, yes. And you do that by involving the audience, by making it not a pitch, but a conversation, an ongoing conversation. I like that observation. Thank you. Is there someone we haven't heard from yet? Okay, hold that thought. In the room, who other forms of engagement have you noticed?
Body language.
Body language. Tell me more about body language.
Well, there's a whole science behind body language. So opening your hands, showing the palms of your hands, making grand gestures, bringing it back, bringing it out, bringing it back with your arms, demonstrates, it kind of flows conversation. It also helps you with your pitch and your tone.
Good, yes. Your body language is part of your message. And people say, George, should I move when I speak? And there's nothing wrong with moving, but move for a purpose. Some people say, oh, I got energy, I gotta move. I got energy, I gotta move, I gotta keep moving because I got energy and I gotta move. Don't do that because that looks dumb and you look nervous. And what happens is when you are moving, pacing, doing this kind of thing, we start to watch the dance and we stop listening. And it gets annoying. But yes, it's okay to use your body to emphasize your message, but you don't want people going away saying, oh, did you see that neat stuff he did with his hands? Wasn't that cool? That's not what you want them to remember. You want them to remember the message. Other forms of engagement that you've noticed?
Know your audience, so when you make examples, you give relevant examples to the audience.
Yeah, talk about points that the audience can identify with. And when you do that, they're engaged because now you're talking to them. What else for engagement?
Making eye contact.
Notice that. Good, yes. If in our culture, in the Western world, if you want to be believed, we want you to look at us when you're talking to us. We want you to make that eye contact because you look more believable. And the rules vary in some cultures, but in our cultures, generally, the eye contact we want to see. And now, I said you need to make eye contact, but don't do this type of thing. Don't do this, oh, George says I got to look at everybody. Here I go. Okay, start over here, this one, down there, another one there. Okay, make it all the way around the room. Oh, finally did it. Oh, I'm not going to do that again. That's done. I can cross that off. No, don't do that. First of all, because that looks robotic. It looks boring. It looks goofy. Instead, imagine you are drawing X's with your eyes, imperfect X's. So look at a person here for a few seconds. Look at a person over there for a few seconds. Person over there, you connect with them. Another person over here, you connect with them. Person over there. So you move your eyes comfortably around the room that looks and feels most natural to the audience. And so at some point, everyone in the audience has said, the speaker was talking to me. Connect with everyone. And by the way, the same thing applies at a trade show. Have some of you manned a booth at a trade show? Good. Okay, so I attended a trade show just recently, and I was with a buddy, and we went up to a table, and he started talking first. So the person behind the table talked to him, and I'm standing over here. And of course, I'm having fun because I like messing with people, and so I'm doing a little bit of this. And my friend who's standing beside me can see out of the corner of his eye. He knows that I'm moving, but the person still doesn't notice me over here. She just kept talking to him. Talk to everyone, not just the person who addressed you, not just the person who asked the question. Connect with everyone in the room because everyone wants to feel involved. Have you ever been at a networking meeting, one of those things where you walk up and there's 3 or 4 people there, and 2 people start, one person starts a conversation, another one asks them, and they just talk to each other. And you're standing here saying, hey, what am I doing over here? I'm part of this conversation. Connect, make everyone feel involved. Eye contact. Engagement, probably one of the most important elements to keep in your presentation. And it's important to include different methods of engagement because they have different powers, and it's not all the engagement is equal. Here's how your presentation should be in terms of engagement. It should be like this. It should be little peaks and valleys. It goes up and down, engage strongly, engage weakly, but changes, and that keeps people interested. Any last comments on engagement techniques that have worked for you?
Well, I noticed that you smile a lot, and I've been accused of smiling a lot. The change is true. It's like, oh, she's smiling again. But generally, people don't want to hear a miserable speaker.
Good observation. Yes. Oh, do you want to answer that?
Like, sometimes you have in presentations little quizzes, or sometimes at the end of the presentation you have some sort of present or gift or some giveaway, so it keeps the audience motivated.
A quiz, a question, yep, is a good technique. Let's go back to the smiling. Because I believe most speakers need to smile more in their presentation. Because, and here's why, there's a few reasons. Number one, when you smile, you look more confident. And if you look more confident, we will pay more attention. When you smile, you look more attractive. And if you look more attractive, we will tend to look at you more. And if we look at you more, we will listen better. The smile, if you're up here and you're speaking to a group and you're saying, oh, I'm smiling at them, but only half the people are smiling back. Yeah, if you're lucky, half of them will smile back. But if you stand up here and you frown like this, they'll all frown at you. There are no ugly audiences. There are only ugly speakers. The audience will mirror the speaker. And some people are just slower to smile. But when you're up here, when you say something positive about your product, about your team, about your awards, franchise award, when you talk about those kind of accomplishments, you should smile with pride because you're proud of it, aren't you? If you're not, you're working for the wrong place. When you talk about what you can do for your clients, smile. When you tell them about the solutions you have, how they can feel more assured when they're buying their house, when they're buying their home, the decisions that you can help them make and feel better about, that's the time you should smile. I'm not saying you should be grinning all the way through like a Cheshire cat, no. But the changes, the occasional smile, and we all smile differently. I can't do, I can't do the Julia Roberts thing, where her teeth come out, like a horse. I can't do that. Like, it's hard to see my teeth. The best smiles are the ones when we see it in your eyes. That's when we know it's a real smile. That's when we know you're sincere. And that's what we want to see from you when you're talking to us. And when you greet us, when you meet us, a smile. And it's the changes that make it more powerful. So yes, do smile.
Eye contact, if it's the right size group.
Yes. Eye contact, yes. Eye contact is critical to making that believable connection with people. Agreed.
Well, and also smiling would look genuine if you weren't connecting with people in the eyes. You just be smiling, like, yeah.
Could be a psychopath.
You connect more.
Be yourself, yeah, no question. I like to dramatize when I'm up here. And I'm not saying that you should speak like me. I don't want the competition. I only want one of me. But I do that for a couple reasons. One, I want you to notice the technique. I want you to notice it and remember it. And two, I happen to enjoy this. I love doing this. So I'm having fun here. And if we're having fun, then the learning, the message can be more powerful, more effective, more memorable. Less painful. Keep the pain up. So there's some ideas for engagement. The third objective, so we talked about informing, key information, 2, engaging people throughout, and the third objective is to move people to action. Move them to act, get them to act. Tell people what you want them to do. don't, you know, I've seen speakers deliver a good presentation, give valid information, and then we're wondering, okay, so what? So what? And they don't tell us what to do. Tell people what you want them to do. Don't assume that they're gonna know. Tell them you want them to sign up for your own franchise in your own territory. Tell them you want them to arrange for the inspection of the home, for the what do you call that photography thing where they take the picture of the heat leakage? What do you call that?
Infrared.
Yeah, that, you know, getting that heat signature. You know, tell them what to do, what it means to them, and tell them what to do. Tell them the next steps. A good phrase to use is next steps. The next step for you, and here's how we can move from here. Here's what we do next. All you gotta do is say, yes, go ahead. All you gotta do is just sign the line. All you gotta do is just give me your credit card. Tell people what you want to do. So, inform, engage, and move to action. So there are 3 things you need to do. I'm gonna open up to questions a couple times during the presentation, and I'm going to open it up now for some questions on any part that you've heard me say so far, or something that you want to make sure that I do cover today. So who has the first question for me? That's Christine.
How do you engage remote staff when you have an internal meeting? So, for example, today is an internal meeting. We do have some remote staff. How would I, as a presenter of a certain portion of a meeting, engage those people with my presentation?
Can they hear you?
They can, yeah.
Okay. And so how do you engage remote? And that is one of the biggest challenges in meetings and businesses today, because it's one thing to give a presentation remote, connect with people in the room. It's tougher to do it remote. No question, it's tougher. It's more challenging. So now it needs to be part of your plan. You have to plan for that in addition to everything else. And it could be that you simply ask for feedback from the remote, or you pick a person or location and ask them and point out, say, let's look at a location here. Well, let's go, are they there?
Yeah.
Okay, Tampa, Florida. Let's tell us about one of the techniques that you use in your presentation that works effectively for you.
I'm thinking you're talking to me, and I guess to engage them would be to give them something to, like, ask them a question that they need to respond to, or like a little bit of a worksheet to do, something where they've got to think about it and then respond.
Good, thank you. A few ideas there. Engage them, give them something to work upon. Let's hear from another location. Who do we have here? How about, Prince Edward County, Jeff.
I guess depending on the size of the group, you might get people engaging with each other as well. So if there's an opportunity for a Q&A, you might have 2 people, talk to your neighbor about something, whether it's introducing them or, some kind of question and answer thing, something that sort of changes where they're looking, who they're talking to, changes their engagement a bit.
Good, yes, I like it. And the key point is that it's changes. You've got to have the changes, and you've got to have people involved. Who else can add to that question about what techniques have you noticed when working with remotes that seem to have worked well? Whether it was you doing it or someone else.
Lunch and learn. Okay, for example, a lunch and learn is pretty good if you're all sitting in the same room and you order a pizza, but it doesn't work when you have remote people attending, because it's like make your own sandwich and bring it to a camera, which isn't a good experience. So one thing that I used to do many years ago, because I used to have lunch and learn, I would actually arrange for a pizza delivery, and so that they had the same consistent experience. Not only was it a big surprise, but it was, wow, I'm actually having a lunch and learn. I don't have to worry about making that sandwich, and it was a good experience. It was costly, and it was time consuming, and yes, you had to prepare for it, because
they hear that? The key point, the message was that when having a lunch and learn with the group, the main group, they might be eating pizza. How about the people that are remote? They might feel left out. Well, what if you arrange for each of them to receive pizza as well? And that takes extra effort, extra cost, but it engages them and makes them feel part of the group. So yes, there are challenges with this technology. The technology save you from flying here and spending time, but there are other challenges and costs involved as well. So we just have to recognize that. Good, I like that. Thank you. Go ahead, back to room.
Just curious if you ever tried this. Let's say none of us were here, we're all remote. Would you consider actually standing in front of the camera and doing your whole thing like that? Or would you sit in front of the computer and everything?
I would stand. Yeah, the question was if there was no one in the room and everyone was remote, would I still stand up here and deliver my presentation, or would I sit at my desk? And the answer is I would stand. Whenever possible, I suggest you stand. In fact, even when you're on the phone, having a phone conversation with someone, I suggest you stand. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, you sound better when you're standing. You're not all scrunched up and slouched over and cutting off. You stand, you sound stronger, and when you stand, you will probably say less. Just try having a standing meeting. Have you ever had a standing meeting with someone? You're having a standing meeting, they'll go a lot shorter than a sitting meeting where everyone's sitting around the table slouching and half listening and not listening. But if you're all standing, if we held a short meeting and we, 6 of us here, we're having a meeting and we stood, that meeting would be done in 10 to 15 minutes. We wouldn't need the hour. You want to turn hour meetings into 15-minute meetings, make them standing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I haven't had that question before. Glad you asked that.
I think also, George, if I may, the facilitators got to keep the remote people engaged. And I think one of the challenges we have is oftentimes there's everybody sitting around a table, and it's easy when you're at the table to interject in a conversation. You can read body language. It's easy to come in and out of the conversation. For remote people, there's almost this inherent delay. And so I think the facilitator has got to recognize that they've got to take a pause if you want involvement to check in with people who are remote, because sometimes they've got to fumble for a mute button, or sometimes there's a bit of a delay, whatever it takes. That I think the facilitator and the people in the room have got to keep the remote people engaged actively.
I agree, and it's a challenge. And have you got any key lessons that you've learned? And I'm pointing at the screen, but you're over there. Go ahead.
Key lessons that I've learned?
Yeah, that have worked for you.
Yeah, just what I was saying. You've got to actively, as a facilitator, you've got to actively be calling on people and keeping them engaged. For the people on the call, not just calling on the people that are in the room, but like you have done, you've said, Tampa, Prince Edward County, you've called on people and make sure that they're paying attention, but it also keeps them involved. Otherwise, it's very easy out here to not stay engaged in the meeting. You lose track of things. It's easy to get distracted.
Good, and I like that you're not letting anyone see that glass of Prince Edward County wine while you're there on camera.
I think I noticed the other thing that you did in that moment when you engaged the remote people was there wasn't an immediate response. So you took your time to wait, as opposed to launching. It's so easy to launch onto the next thing you don't hear something immediately.
Good point. Yeah, when you put a challenge out there or a question, people need time to process it. Don't step over top of them. Allow them to collect their thoughts and come out with what they've got to say. And that's both remotely, especially remotely, but as well as in the room. Give people time to respond.
I was going to say, we've talked here about how to engage the remote, but what's missing is the remote not engaged with us, sitting in this room. And now in retrospect, I probably would have suggested that we have this screen up on that screen, or ask everyone, even if you're just sitting here, and a lot of you can bring your computers, but either, like I logged in so I could see everyone's faces. But products, so that it actually goes 2 ways, right? You all have to engage with each other. So right now, we've asked the remote to engage with you, but we're not engaged with the remote. So just opportunities there to make it feel as much like we're all in the same room as possible.
Yeah, good suggestion. I like that. Yeah, so put the images up on the wall so that everyone can see, or put it on
And then
everyone.
we can see us.
Yeah.
Right now, I mean, we can't do that with our technology, we have to see you, but if you weren't here and you were presenting, and we were just having a meeting, we would, and we do that in a lot of the meetings, but we don't necessarily, we can't see their faces right now. We do that in some of our smaller meetings, so in the boardroom, we have everybody's faces on the screen. But that's probably, for me right now, what's missing, and that's why I logged in, so I could see everybody. Like, the people-
Yeah, we don't know who's in the room there.
Yeah, you can't.
We see each other remotely, but we don't know who's behind the camera.
If I spin that camera around, will that make them seasick?
It might.
Okay.
If you go slow,
Yeah, then when I
Like a
get
Titanic iceberg,
that
slow.
okay, and the thought that just went through my head, that might be where, in this case, I'm this presenter, might be an idea where you have a second camera that from time to time looks at people within the room.
Right.
Just like they do in the movies.
Yeah.
Just, the people need the shots, yeah, because they might be tired of looking at me by now.
They call the fourth wall in TV.
Right.
They don't see that, right?
Good
Yeah.
point, yes, yeah. Or in comics as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, reaching out to the audience. Good, I like that. There's some good suggestions there. Let's take a look at questions. And there are 3 ways that you could use questions in your presentation. The most common way is where you, the presenter, take questions from the group and then you answer. And that's good, that's effective, because that's where you will hear interests come up that you weren't aware of. That's where the audience can go deeper and test your knowledge to learn more about the details. So that works well. However, here's how I see it done poorly. Here's what happens. Person comes up here, they deliver their, they start off the presentation, they deliver their presentation, and then they end, they close, and then they say, any questions? Which is a dumb question in itself. Explain why. And then people aren't ready for the questions, and so the questions start off with maybe a weak question, and then you get some really good questions in the middle, and then it peters off, and then you end up with a couple or a few weak questions. And then the speaker says, okay, well, I guess we're done now. What a lousy way to end. Don't do that. Now, when should you take questions? It's up to you. You decide. Generally, as the presenter, if you set the rules, usually people will follow the rules. Not all the time, but usually. So you can say, just ask your questions anytime and I'll take them. Or you can say, just raise your hand and I'll recognize you and I'll take your question. Or you can say, you know what? There's 3 sections I'm going to talk about today, and at the end of each section, I will take questions about that one and then move on. By the way, that's a good technique when you are presenting a proposal, because what you do is you present the first part of the plan, you ask for questions about that, and then you move on, as opposed to getting to the end and somebody has a question, you lost them at the beginning. And you lost them completely because you didn't address an issue. So that's a good way if you've got a logical flow, a flow proposal that builds on what you said before. So you take those questions, you go. Or you could take questions near the end. Near the end, not at the end. So when you take questions near the end, here's what you do. You say, I'm going to take questions, I'm going to open up the questions. Give people a warning that you're going to take questions. Tell them when you're going to do it, and say, okay, in 2 minutes, I'm going to open up for questions. Think about questions, and we'll open up. So you tell people that the questions are coming, and then you get to the point where you're going to open up the questions. Instead of saying any questions, because it's a silly phrase, it doesn't prompt them to think, it doesn't get them thinking, and you want them to think. So say, who has the first question about delivering better presentations? Or who has a questions about what I talked about here so far? Who has a question on this topic? Who has a question about how this program will work for you? So plant the message in people's mind, tell them where you want them to go with their questions. They'll come up with the questions faster and they'll be more focused. You direct them and they'll come out with better questions. But start with who has, not any questions. Who has, or who wants to ask the first question? And then you wait. And what happens, sometimes you wait and there's no question coming. So what can you do?
You can ask questions. Or you can proactively answer a question.
You could pose a question. You could say, a question that I'm often asked is, or a question that I was asked recently is. So you pose the question, and then you answer it. And to the audience, it feels like a question and answer. They don't care that you asked the question. And by the way, you'll have a good answer because you knew the question was coming. Now people's minds, the pump is primed. Now they're into question and answer mode. And they may come up with a question. You might have to do that technique again, a second time. But you're not going to need to do it 3 times. You do it 2 times, and they're going to be ready to go. Because now they've heard 2 questions and answer, they feel safer, and their brain's working on questions of their own. So you work through the questions, and once you're coming to the end of your question period, you say, okay, the question, we're running out of time for questions, and now I'm going to close. So you tell them that now I'm going to close. It's not done yet. Now you deliver your close. Your close is the line that you want to leave them with. This is the call to action. It could be the next steps. It could be the summary of the points, but it's a close that you want them to remember. You don't want them to remember the answer to a weak question. End strong. Start strong, end strong. We tend to remember best beginnings and endings. So end the way you want. So that's how you can manage answering questions from the audience. That's the first way to use questions. Second way to use questions is where you pose questions to the audience. Now you can pose it out to the audience in general, or you might pick a particular person if you know they have some experience, or you see them, they seem to be engaged with you at that point, or especially when they're remote and it's time to re-engage them, you can pose out, say, let's hear, we haven't heard from, who haven't we heard from for a while? Who have we got here? Ken in Cincinnati. Ken in Cincinnati, when you take questions, how do you normally start your question period off? What works well for you?
Normally, we've arrived, something to the effect of, we've arrived at the time for questions. And normally I say, please ask away.
Okay, I like that. Please ask away. Yes, good. So the point is that you're telling them the questions are coming and you are inviting them. So make it an invitation. Yes, good. I like that. Good. Thank you, Ken. So when you ask questions of the audience, that's a good way to engage them. However, it's risky because you don't know what they're going to say. And especially if you say something, well, you agree with me, don't you? No? Okay. Now you're done. So don't ask that question. Be careful of that. But when you ask a question of the audience, it's a good technique, but you don't know what the answer is going to be. So always be prepared to work with whatever answer you get. So if it isn't the answer that you want to hear, don't do this. No, you're wrong. Because if you do, what have you done?
Shut down all the other questions.
You shut down everything. Yeah, everybody's not going to play with you. They're not going to play anymore. So what you do is say, I like your thinking. That's creative. Who else can add to that? Who has another perspective on that? Who can help us out? So you build on it. So you keep the thing moving. It's about keeping the thing moving. And even if they don't say exactly what you wanted them to say, if they're close, you say, yes, thank you. And you can rephrase the answer. So that's you asking questions to the audience. And here's the third way to use questions. Use rhetorical questions. And if you did nothing else in your presentation, but you injected rhetorical questions throughout, it would improve your presentation immensely. And here's why. So the rhetorical question. What other clients have we helped with problems like this one? How have we addressed this challenge in the past? What are the solutions that we have? How would we implement that for you? How would it look if we were to work with you? And so you ask the question, you pose the question, you pause, and then you answer. So the question, the rhetorical question, becomes the transition phrases. Why that works well for you is, one, first of all, it's an easy way for you to write your presentation. If you want to write your presentation quickly, just interview yourself. Use the rhetorical questions. Ask the most common questions. You know what they are. You just list them down. You list down the 7 or 8 or 10 questions, and then so now's your presentation. You don't have to memorize it. You know the answers. You just have to remember. You make a list of the questions. You pose the question, you answer it. Pose the question, you answer. And if you can put it in a logical sequence, it's even easier for the audience to follow. Now, what it does for them is that they hear a question, and again, when questions engage stronger than statements. Statements tend to be boring in general. It has to be a really strong statement. But even weak questions engage us. So you pose the question, it engages people's minds. Also, when we ask a question, our voice tends to fluctuate. It changes, so it makes it more interesting than statements. Statements are boring, blah, 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 blah. But if you pose a question in between, question, blah, 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 question, blah, 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 the questions add some engagement in between the blah, blah part. So you pose the question, and it engages the people, and it makes the audience, makes it easier because they hear the question, and our brain goes, yeah, that's a good question. I wonder what the answer is. And then you answer it for them. Because if you've done this more than once, you know what those questions are going to be. So there's 3 ways that you can use questions in your presentation. Body language was mentioned earlier. Let's just mention a little bit about body language. And body language is a misnomer. It's not really a language. It's more like a code or cipher, because we think it means something, but it might not necessarily. It's how we interpret it. And we do know that some gestures generally mean a particular message, but not all the time. For example, if you see someone sitting out there like this with their arms crossed, you think, oh, they're crossing me out, they're not letting me in. No, not necessarily. It could be that they're tired, they're cold, they're comfortable that way, that's how they sit. So it doesn't necessarily mean something. However, if you look around the room and you notice everyone is in there sitting like this with their arms crossed, yeah, they're crossing you out. The room is not. And the same thing when you're up here as the speaker, be aware of those messages that the audience might see. So if you're standing about here and you're talking about, oh, we stand behind our policy and we're not afraid of anything, but you're doing this kind of thing, it doesn't look believable. If you want to look believable, you need to look open so that it feels open to the audience. So as much as possible, you want the open hands, you want the open arms. Ideally, when you're up here, when you're speaking, people say, George, what do I do with my hands? Well, you just leave them at the end of your arms. That's where they belong. But people get up here in the front of the room and they think, oh, my hands, they can see my hands, they're naked. What do I do with them? Put them in my pocket, hide it behind my back, do it down here. What do I do with my hands? Ideally, let your hands hang at your sides most of the time. This feels awkward at first. It's hard to get used to it, but yet this looks most natural and looks and strong and open to the audience. So you have to practice to do this. But if you do this, you hold your hands at the side like this. As you talk, as you become more passionate, your hands will just naturally move to support your message. They don't become distracting. Movement. Should you move? Yeah, but don't do the back and forth thing. And if you're presenting progress, you want to present progress to the group, you can do it with your body and your hands. And remember this, that we read left to right. We read left to right. And we generally, when we look at a piece of paper, we start at the top and we read down it. But the fact that we read left to right, and if we had a chart here, and there was a chart over time, the line would go up like that. Hopefully, sales are good, profit and sales are good. But the point is it goes from left to right. So if you're delivering, you want to talk about, illustrate progress to the group, you want to show things moving from left to right. So here's what it means to you. Left to right as the audience sees you, not your left to right. So now you got to reverse what you're thinking. So if you're talking about time or progress, you talk about moving from here to there. And it could be as simple as saying, well, here's the problem. So put problems in the past, solution and opportunities in the future. Here's the problem, here's how we addressed it, and here's where it's going next. So a simple thing of use the left to right, we see that, and it creates a visual image in our brain of we're seeing your body language is matching the words. If you do it the wrong way, it confuses us slightly. The point is that send a message in more than one channel to your audience. Does that make sense? And it takes a little bit getting, that you have to rehearse to get used to going from left to right. But it's the same thing when you're sitting in a meeting. You could do the same thing when you're talking to people. You don't have to move the body. It could be simply, here's the past, here's the future. Here's the problem, here's the solution. As people see you. Also, by the way, when it comes to body language at meetings, especially if you're sitting around a table, when we see, there's two parts of your body that we want to see that helps build trust. One is the face, in particular the eyes. We want to see your eyes, so that's why you don't sit in a meeting with sunglasses on, because we can't tell where your eyes are, what's going on there. It looks like you're deceptive, so we want to see your eyes, and that means that if you're presenting to a group, you want to make sure they can see your face. Keep objects away from the front of your face. Don't go putting your hand in front of your face like this, or if you got a microphone, putting it in front of your face. You hold the mic down here, speak across it. If you got a prop, then hold it in front of your head, hold it out here. Don't block your face. We want to see your face because that's the first line of believability. And the second object that we want to see is your hands. Let people see your hands. So you're sitting at a table, you want to build trust, put your hands on the table, not under the table. It just enhances the message. It's little tweaks here and there. Question or comment?
Well, I was going to ask, so one of the things that we do a lot of is present to PowerPoint on screen. And a lot of times I see people looking at the PowerPoint and not people, and that ladders up to a bigger problem, which is there's too much content and too many words in the PowerPoint slide, and they therefore have to read it. It's not like, there's the two extremes of TED Talk, which is, nothing, an image, a word, up to like a long diatribe of words, and most people err towards the latter, towards the too many words. So because of that, they tend to have to read, and because of that, they're facing away from the audience. So some tricks, or what do you recommend if you're obviously the first thing is produce your PowerPoint slide deck, but other than that, if they still have to read, like, what do you recommend? How do you transition from reading a PowerPoint and pointing out things on a PowerPoint to still engaging an audience without putting your back to them?
You touched a nerve here.
Too many PowerPoint?
No, well, no, yeah.
Or PowerPoint in general?
PowerPoint, well, the misuse of PowerPoint. It's not that PowerPoint is bad. It's just that people don't know how to use it properly, so they misuse it because it's so easy to use, and because they've seen so much of it used poorly that they seem to think that that's the example it should be done. Well, I'm no worse than she was. Really? That's your claim? I'm no worse than her presentation? Don't you want to get better? I have a one-day program on how to work better with PowerPoint. So, short answer to your question is, if you're going to use slides, first of all, each slide helps you convey one message, not a list of text. Second of all, big mistake that people make is they believe that text on a screen is a visual. Text on a screen is not a visual, it's text. That's why it's called text. There's no magazines, you have text and you have images. Images are, the best thing to put up on a screen is images. That means pictures, cartoons, flowcharts. That's the best thing. Maybe a word and an image. But whatever you put on the screen, don't read it to people. If you feel you have to read it, then don't put it on the screen. Real simple. The screen and you should work like partners, not a duet. We don't want you singing the same thing that's on the screen because we can read it ourselves. Next time, just send us the slides. We don't need you. Does that short answer?
But yes, so, but I was asking, like, how do you transition? Even if you have something on the screen that you're pointing to, how do you naturally transition? And because I see a lot of people turning their back because they're pointing at the screen.
Yes, don't. Okay. Don't, yeah. This doesn't look good. That doesn't look good. So don't do that. First of all, know what's coming up on the screen. Have a monitor in front of you if you need to check what's coming up, and introduce the slide before it shows. Introduce the slide so that people know that you know what's coming, and then they know what to do when the slide comes up. So you tell them on this next slide, you will notice, and then slide comes up, you shut up for a few seconds so that they can see it, and then you speak. Don't speak while you want them looking at the slide. You want them looking at the slide, or you want them looking at you? If you're talking, you want them looking at you. That's a day seminar summarizing.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Quick one.
Can I extend that question to the use of flip charts and whiteboards and so on? So you have 3 top choices you want to demonstrate. What are your thoughts on, do those go on a flip chart to create a visual, or is that just wasting time?
The flip charts, how to make best use of flip charts. First of all, could you use a flip chart? And the answer is yes. I like flip charts. Flip charts are good for small groups. Flip charts are good for if it's an if you're generating ideas, as opposed to delivering information. So if you're collecting information, you go to the audience and you say, okay, here's the question. What are the challenges and what are the dangers in buying a home uninspected? Okay, let's get some insights. I like that one, write it down. Like that idea, write that down. Like that idea, let's write it down. Okay, now let's expand those out. Of the 12 we got, which are the 3 most relevant? So the flip chart is good for helping you create energy in the room, because you're writing the text as you go there. And they're building something, so it's good for that kind of use. Yeah, and generally a small group works well for that. And you can do the same thing with a whiteboard, type of thing too. Yeah, cool. I always believe you should start your meetings on time. Doesn't matter who's not there, start on time, and I always believe you should finish on time. By the way, finish on time even if you started late. Don't say, well, because we started 10 minutes late, we'll go an extra 10. No. You cut it, you finish early, you finish on time. So we will finish on time. We've got, I see by my clock here, we've got 5 minutes to go. So at this point, what I'd like to hear from you is, what's the best idea that you heard today that you will make use of? And maybe it's something you're already doing, but now you'll make more use of it. So who would like to start us off? And let's go to remote first and hear from someone we haven't heard from yet. Who haven't we heard from? Nathan in Kansas. Best idea.
Kansas City. Hello, everyone. So we use a lot of presentations in our team, typically from a go-to-meeting standpoint. So I think some of the biggest takeaways I got from you, I love the standing part, but that may not be quite as feasible when you're dealing one-on-one versus in a group setting. So I really enjoyed the fact, and you mentioned a lot about the face, the hands, having nothing covering the face, and just some of the takeaways you mentioned from the visual standpoint, especially when we are presenting materials, to not be reading to them, but to be highlighting them. And I think probably the biggest piece is a lot of times, especially people, if they're more talkative, might be a great word, or salesmen is typically what gets referred to as, they talk way too much. They don't pause or stop for questions or feedback because they're too busy talking. And you referenced that earlier about talking someone even out of a sale, right into and right out of because you wouldn't shut up. So kind of the takeaways on this end. So I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear from Joel in Aurora.
Yeah, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold here. But the things that I wrote down in regards to the presentation were that stood out to me was move people to act. I know a lot of the things that we have that we're presenting on in front of our larger groups, that they're not any good to them unless they actually move to act upon what we presented. So I thought that resonated with me in today's discussion.
Thank you, Joel. Let's hear from Jay and Laura. I used to live in Fergus. Hi,
Oh,
Jay.
I was born or raised in Fergus.
What best idea from you?
I'm doing it right now. See what I just did there, George? I paused for 3 seconds.
I like it. Thank you.
No problem.
I like it. Nicely done. With that, I said we're going to finish on time and like to hear from everybody, but we don't have time. And you don't have time. And remember that. There just isn't enough time. So with that, I'm going to close. I'll leave you with these 3 points. 1, the ability to communicate your message, to present your message, it's a skill. It's not a talent. That means you can learn it. Take the techniques from here that make most sense from you and start using them. Just pick 1 or 2 or 3 ideas that'll work for you and start using them more often and make it a habit and build your skill. Number 2, I suggest that you find presentation buddies within your team and start talking about some of these ideas and testing your presentations on each other's. And when you present for someone else and you want to get feedback, don't say, how was it? Because that's a silly question. Instead, ask for specific feedback. How did that story work? Was it too long? Do you think I explained the process clear enough? What suggestions, where can I get better? So look for suggestions. And by the way, if you want, in the booklets, you have my contact information, and at any time you want to reach out to me by email with questions about presentation, I will answer it. Make your questions as specific as possible, because if I have to sit there thinking about it, what's he trying to say, it goes into read later, which means read never. But I will answer your questions. Just be specific, please. And number 3, the last point is this. It's not about delivering a perfect presentation. It's about delivering, and this is what I want to see you do more of. I want to see you go out there and deliver a superior presentation. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Everyone, I'll call it together.